Okay guys, so we have some really new and interesting information in regards to not just Dragonflight, but what is to come after and possibly in the next 10 years of World of Warcraft. So, for all the people that have been talking about Dragonflight being the last expansion, it is all but confirmed that the next expansion is already in the works. There are probably plans for even more, and Blizzard also gave some information on how they plan to structure the lore as they go further. Apparently, there will no longer be a single contained story with a single villain like Wrath of the Lich King, for example, but expansions will connect one with the other, starting the so-called third era of WoW. So, what is all this information? And trust me, there is a lot of stuff to unpack. With the Dragonflight pre-patch out and the expansion coming out any day now, there is a really cool tool that can come in really handy, and that is the sponsor of this video, WarcraftDB.com. Essentially, it is a web-based dungeon journal that is completely up to date with the Dragonflight pre-patch. You can look at all the dungeons, raids, check out the overviews, abilities, and drops all right through your browser at the click of a button. So make sure to use my link in the description below and check out Warcraft Database. So, the information itself comes from PreachGaming. At this point, this is not yet an official blue post, official like Blizzard interview type thing, but essentially, he went to Blizzard headquarters, talked with a bunch of developers, and they revealed quite a bit of information, and let's just say it is about the same as an official statement. I'd say they even revealed a bit more information than they possibly expected. Now, right off the bat, the info that we have learned is not some crazy leak. We didn't learn what the next expansion will be or who will be the ultimate villain of Dragonflight, but we did learn quite a bit on the new Blizzard strategy, how they plan to proceed in the future, and what is in store for World of Warcraft as we go forward. So, the most important bit of news is that Blizzard is referring to Dragonflight as the start of the WoW's third era, which I'm guessing doesn't really come off as a shock to any of you, as Blizzard already talked about how Shadowlands was the ending of the so-called saga. Keep in mind, these are very vague terms, and this era refers a bit more to gameplay side of the game, but it also refers to the lore itself. Think of it this way: the first era would be classic up to maybe around the time of Cataclysm, second era would be Warlords of Draenor up to Dragonflight, so a lot of these experimental features such as garrisons, warfronts, Torghast, and even experimental lore-wise with time travel, alternate realities, going into the afterlife, and just all this crazy stuff, etc, etc. Now, don't get me wrong, we don't expect that this new era is going to just erase all this, but apparently they are now taking a different approach. One of the things they talked about is how pretty much they added new features every single expansion. People ended up not liking these features, so they just completely scrapped them. Examples of this would be the garrisons or even Torghast. Now, in the new era, they plan to essentially bring back these features to enhance them and to fix the bad parts. Unrelated to this, allegedly they confirmed that housing won't be coming anytime soon, and that the engine at the moment is just not capable of making this work, at least as they wish for it to work. But that is a point for another video. This is obviously a lore channel, so let's get into the most important part, and that is what is to come in regards to the story. The most important point is that Blizzard is planning to make a multi-expansion story arc, which to many of you may seem obvious with Shadowlands, as that pretty much had an entirely cliffhanger open ending to the expansion. In my opinion, this is both a good and also can be a bad thing. What this means in practical terms is that we more than likely won't ever get expansions like Wrath of the Lich King, where he was the bad guy, the Lich King, then we went into Cataclysm, where Deathwing was a bad guy, then we went into Pandaria, where Garrosh was a bad guy, but instead it will apparently all be seamless with one expansion leading into another. In my opinion, this is both a good and a bad thing, but honestly, this is just a really tricky line they're playing with here, as it can be an incredibly positive thing, but if done wrong, it can be incredibly negative as well. Personally, I like the fact that we won't be getting these 1 billion type expansions, as WoW is nearly 20 years old at this point. It made sense the first few times, but logically, the storyline just gets completely and utterly ridiculous as time goes by. I mean, just think about it. In the course of like 10 years, we invaded Outland, had the Northern campaign and the Scourge, had Deathwing shatter half the planet, had a Horde civil war, went to alternate Draenor, got invaded by the Legion, and then we had a massive war. I mean, this makes sense from a gameplay perspective because people want new things, but when you add all these things, it just seems just super ridiculous. And honestly, what Blizzard confirmed with this is actually a good thing, and we have kind of already noticed the steps they had taken by this point. For example, they added a time skip in order to distance themselves a bit from these events and to start a new era, and they pretty much told us this officially in a blue post. Personally, I think this could be great, as this way they could have a lot more content to work with. They wouldn't just have to use a villain and just scrap the barrel for villains for every single expansion, and then to just completely abandon them for like a decade, which really was the case with quite a few characters over the years. However, the bad side of this story is that if executed badly, it is not going to be a good thing, and it is probably going to make it worse. Best example would be Shadowlands. When you hear all this new information, it makes kind of sense that they already started this with Shadowlands, and now with new Dragonflight lore, Shadowlands is starting to make a bit more sense as we are learning more about the cosmology, the first ones, and all this new lore they created, so things are kind of starting to fall back into place. However, at the time when Shadowlands was active, this was just incredibly super slow-paced and boring. We were just throwing a whole bunch of lore our way, had huge content routes, and ultimately the story just ended up being completely rushed and literally not making any sense. So if they plan to do it this way, this is not going to be a good thing. You can't create like a 3-expansion huge villain and have like 3-year-long expansions with cliffhangers to finally get to that big reveal. I mean, people are literally just going to ditch halfway through and just lose interest. I mean, it's cool to have this overarching story, but the chapters also have to be incredibly satisfying in themselves. Like, they have to be expansions for themselves. Otherwise, you get the jailer and this I'm saving the universe for what is to come scenario, and a year-long wait of pretty much not doing anything. However, luckily there are quite a bit of good news. Apparently, through the interviews, it is confirmed that Blizzard is already working on the next expansion after Dragonflight. Furthermore, this is a bit more of a rumor than a confirmed thing, but apparently Blizzard had a meeting where they were discussing the next 10 years of WoW, which means that possibly multiple expansions are planned at this point. This is quite contrary to people that believe that Dragonflight would be the ultimate finale of Warcraft series and that the game is dying. It really seems like Dragonflight might just be the start of a new era of World of Warcraft, and that they're not planning on stopping WoW's development anytime soon, which to me is excellent news. In my opinion, this means that this new storyline and the storyline itself is going to be heavily based on the entire cosmology thing and the new lore that was started with the brokers in Shadowlands. I'm expecting we're going to get big reveals of the first ones, and that is going to be the main focus point of the lore going forward. Furthermore, this implies that Dragonflight might not really be the reveal expansion that we believed it to be, and that all mysteries are just going to be uncovered with the Dragonflight finale, and instead that might be left for the expansion that is to come after. Honestly, I'm kind of on the fence about this one. For one, I'm glad there will be a big overarching story, but I really hope the Dragonflight doesn't leave us with yet another cliffhanger and we finally start getting some meat and actual lore, as personally as a YouTuber I've been just literally speculating for like 3 years straight, and nothing has been kind of hard confirmed at this point. Everything is pretty much still up in the air. There's just all these cliffhangers and all these things that could or might happen, but we don't really know what is going on. The good side though of this entire matter is that Blizzard might actually be serious, and these might not actually be false promises, as let's be real, they really whipped out this expansion in no time. They announced it in April and it's already coming out in a few weeks. The beta started super fast as well. If we can get fast expansions like these and a bunch of patches in between without content routes like in the Shadowlands, this might be good for the future of World of Warcraft, and it might mean that the future is actually going to be pretty exciting. Thank you for watching. Check out Khalil in return by clicking on the screen, and check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos of real world history. See you next time.